This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by iZotope, Native Instruments, Roswell Pro Audio, and Atom Audio. You're hearing my voice right now through the beautiful Roswell Pro Audio Aztec tube microphone, mixed through iZotope, Ozone, RX, and Neutron, all on Atom Audio monitors and headphones. Please check out our awesome sponsors using the links in the show notes. Also, please remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel because it's a great way for you to help support this show. Now get ready to rock.
I'm using iZotope. I love their dynamic EQ. But yeah, I use them every day. Like, you know, if I had like a short form list of like plugins, because we got like that would be one that that would be a subscription that I would definitely have.
Right. And that's for like music production, because you do a variety of stuff, right? You do audiobooks as well and voiceover and things like that.
Yeah, I've done a bunch. And I hadn't done any of those until the Studio Portland, because there's a lot of actors that live on the coast of Maine. Surprisingly, there's lots of mind-blowing how many people live and you can see why it's so beautiful. But with the pandemic, a lot of them never left. They had places here and they just stayed and got rid of their spots and
just
LA.
Stayed up in Maine.
Yeah, like a lot of them moved up from California and up from New York City.
Yeah,
and they just stay there now.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lij Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. At iZotope, tone shaping is topping the charts. Meet the Catalyst series, Plasma, Aurora, and Cascadia. Plasma's flux saturation technology brings dynamic warmth and depth to your mix. Aurora takes spatial audio to new heights with lush adaptive reverb, while Cascadia adds exciting delays to your mix, retaining clarity through its smart unmasking feature. Get 10% off Plasma, Aurora, Cascadia, or any of the iZotope plugins with the special code ROCK10 and make your mixes rock at iZotope.com. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lij Shaw. Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Ryan Ordway, a versatile artist, songwriter, producer, and engineer with over 2 decades in the music industry. Skilled in analog and digital production, Ryan has recorded and produced nearly 1,000 songs across many genres. Built and managed 3 commercial studios, well done, dude, and now co-leads the Studio Portland in Portland, Maine.
Yes.
A place I actually drive through every summer. A space he helped remodel in 2024. Under his direction, the studio hosts WCLZ's Studio Z sessions, where Ryan has recorded artists like Noah Kahan, Grace Potter, and Lake Street Dive, to name just a few. I've worked with 2 of those artists, too, and they're great. That's an awesome list of artists, man. Ryan's songwriting has brought him to Nashville's renowned Blackbird Studios in the past, where he collaborated with legendary producer Ken Scott. His track Easy Street, produced by Ken, was featured in Getting Started with Music Production, and Ryan's song Back Again received a Song of the Year nomination at the 2022 New England Music Awards. And in 2023, he was recognized as Producer of the Year, and that's up in New England, right?
Yeah, for the New England area, yeah.
That's so cool, man. That's awesome. His work is widely licensed, appearing in shows like The Office, Happy Endings, and Raising Hope, and his cover of Send Me On My Way featured in a Nature Valley TV campaign. Alongside his creative work, Ryan is an educator at the Studio Portland, leading training programs and recording camps for upcoming audio engineers. He also manages voiceover and ADR post-production for top clients like Lucasfilms, Netflix, HBO, and Penguin Random House, making him a well-rounded figure in music and media production. Don't you like the fancy wording in these intros?
Well-rounded.
Yeah. Special thanks to Dave Godowski for making our introduction. You rock, Dave. Thank you. Please welcome Ryan Ordway to Recording Studio Rockstars, Ryan. Are you ready to rock, dude?
I sure am. Thanks for having me.
Dude, it's great to have you here in the show, on the show and in the new podcast studio right here in Nashville.
Yeah, it's great to be here. This is a very cozy spot you got here, and your studio out back is wonderful, so I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I know. There's a part of me that wishes that the podcast was just taking place like right in the studio, right in the control room, but I sort of learned a while ago that it's really, you kind of have to do one or the other, and you're always setting up and tearing down. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to have a dedicated studio for interviews and the video and stuff like that.
I've run into those issues with the studio in Portland, going between recording bands and then TV shows for ADR stuff.
Yeah.
There's been like switching gears, and then like the way because a lot of the actors that are used to going to specialized ADR studios, but we are always jumping between the two. So it's a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that I've learned in doing a studio is that you can have the kind of studio that is always set up to do one thing, or you can have a studio where you're sort of zeroing it out and starting it over all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd used to do like the zeroed out studio for a long time, where I'd like clean the whole place up after a session and set up for every session. And there's some cool stuff to that, but then finally I got to a point where I was like, you know what? I just want to produce a lot of music, and it's quicker to just leave the drum set up and mic'd up, you know?
Yeah, I had that same revelation when we did the remodel at the studio in Portland. I said to myself, why am I doing the same thing over and over? Like, why am I mic the drums pretty much the same way. You know, I'll switch things out here and there and like do character mics that are different, but I'm like, I didn't get into this because I like plugging in cables and setting up and struggling with mic
It's pretty
stands.
fun at the beginning though.
It is, but it's cool. But like you said, like, you know, coming from a songwriter side, I get to the point where I like to just get in and move. Yeah. You know, so I agree. I mean, there's times when it's fun when you go into a new space, you're like, all right, let's try this corner or do this or that. But I guess when you're in a space and you're just trying to be, you know, you're trying to be somewhere by 6 o'clock at night or get stuff done and you know.
Yeah, totally. All right. Well, so lots of fun stuff I want to talk to you about. But first of all, you're a long ways from Maine. So
yes.
Tell us about your journey here. Of course, this will come out later, but you know, you're in Nashville now.
Yeah.
What brings you to Nashville?
Well, I'm just down here, just kind of connecting with some friends that live in town, and you know, just kind of sniffing around a little bit. You know, I've got a catalog of music that I've been just sitting on for many years, and I'm like, it's time for me to, you know, do something more with it. And I'm like, all right, so just kind of, you know, I've been at the studio for the last 4.5 years. And I now have new partners that are kind of taking care of the day-to-day. Yeah. And so they're kind of leading the role on that, where now I'm kind of I'm focused more on production and songs and getting my songs out there. So it's been kind of a relief. And, you know, Portland, Maine's amazing, but, you know, there's a bit of a ceiling there. Like, I don't want to be complacent. So I'm just like, who knows what will happen. So came down to connect with a few people down here, and just, I love Nashville.
Right.
You know?
So a big part of your focus is as an artist, as a songwriter, even though you're simultaneously running studios and have actually run 3 commercial studios.
It's actually 4.
Yeah.
4 now.
So maybe let's start there. You know, I read your intro, but give us kind of a brief arc of your story from like getting interested in music and then, you know, working your way through some studios and then opening the studio Portland. Okay. Or I guess you didn't open it, you collaborated, you like teamed up, right?
Yeah. So I grew up in the Lakes region of New Hampshire, about an hour and a half north of Boston.
Yeah, some of the greatest lakes ever.
Yeah, it's right by Lake Winnipesaukee and Wolfboro and Wakefield, New Hampshire. Yeah. And but we got tons of lakes there. But grew up there. There was no I started playing music when I was about 14 or 15. There was no music store, so I learned how to play guitar around a campfire. We would camp on the weekends and do hike a mountain, set up a tent, and just jam around a fire. And, I played sports all my life up until 15 or 14, 15. And I just realized I wasn't getting any bigger. And I just realized that, music has always been like, I remember just being like a 5 or 6 year old and driving down the road, and hearing Waylon Jennings, and just being like, wow, that's really moves me, So I've always loved music, but the thing that really kind of launched me into saying like, wow, it kind of blew me away was seeing my uncle Danny on VH1 and MTV in the 80s and 90s. He's the lead singer of the Rembrandts. And,
oh, cool.
Yeah, Danny. And so that made me I was like, whoa, never thought of music as a career or potential, but like pretty cool turning on TV when you're a teenager and seeing. So I got this crazy idea. I'm like, I'm gonna chase this music thing down. So played music all through high school, had a band, moved out to LA when I was 19, and kind of got my butt kicked out there a little bit. Like, all right, just on like where I was musically.
Tell the rock stars a little bit about Rembrandts in case they don't know anything.
Yeah, so the Rembrandts, Danny, everyone knows them from the TV show Friends,
right?
The theme song for that. But Danny and Phil, it had just other Just the Way It Is Baby. He's written for a lot of other people, so he's had a lot of other success through his career. But everybody knows him from Friends because that's like
awesome. Yeah, that's talk about hearing your song a lot.
Jeez, yeah. I mean, like it's going off like probably firecrackers right now. How many people watching it in the world? But,
amazing.
But no, it was just that was inspiring, and I've always reached out to him and just been like, hey, and he's like, the best way to do it is you just got to do it. There's no magic. Nobody can just snap their fingers for you. You got to pay your dues and do it, and it's been really inspiring in that way.
Yeah,
But yeah, seeing that, and then I ended up moving to LA, came back. Moved to Boston to go to Berkeley. Didn't end up going to Berkeley because I started touring and teaching music. I was teaching guitar lessons in Boston. I had like 60 students a week, and I had a band in Boston. We toured all over the country and did, had some got our first national tours out of the way. The wild first days of 8 weeks on the road, and we had some fun. And ever since then, I've
And when you touring while you were in Boston at that chapter.
Yeah.
And so like, what did a tour look like then? I mean, is it like very East Coast focused?
A lot of it was East Coast. We did a couple national tours, but like we did a lot of like ski mountains and showcases for like, was it Nemo? No, what was it? NEMA? Or it was the one that was the national, college.
Where you could showcase for the college tour circuit. Yeah.
It was NACA.
Yeah. I never did that, but I remember hearing about that.
So yeah, we did that. We did one of those showcases. And
I always loved the line in Spinal Tap where they're like, where the Boston show gets canceled. Yeah. And the manager's like, don't worry about it. It's not a very big college town anyway.
That's like all it is.
Yeah, that's all it is.
Yeah. So yeah, we did a lot of like ski mountains, and we played the Paradise.
Paradise is great. I've done. And then what about was the Channel still around?
No, the Channel wasn't.
Gone now,
Harper's Ferry.
Okay.
Used to play Harper's Ferry a bunch.
I don't think I ever went to Harper's Ferry. TT the Bears.
TT the Bears, I played there.
Too,
yeah, and before that, unfortunately closed. That was a cool little spot.
Yeah.
But I used to do we do Vermont. We'd head up and play in Burlington and northern Maine and the woods of New Hampshire and just play these like wild gigs where there's like 60 people by a ski mountain and they are just dancing like you are the Beatles, or just out of their control.
Yeah, and just to like paint a picture, like up in New Hampshire, up in Maine, you've got, New Hampshire especially, I think, right? Does Maine or New Hampshire have more skiing? I know Vermont has a lot of skiing.
They all have quite a bit of skiing. Yeah, all three of them.
Well, so like, in the summertime, it's gorgeous weather.
Yep.
It's, New Hampshire's these beautiful lakes. So there's this whole summer culture. And in the wintertime, it's skiing, it's ice skating, it's hockey, it's all this stuff. But
snowmobiling.
It's snowmobiling. And I don't know what the, après snowmobile world is like, but in the ski zone, everybody takes a break afterwards and they just want a big party.
Yeah.
All night down at the ski lodge, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. There's people ready to hang out. It was pretty wild and fun. And also there's a couple of spots like up in northern Maine, like by the Canadian border, where like people drive their snowmobile in there. I've never played there, but I got buddies that go up and play. And you're like in the middle of nowheres and they're playing in like this lodge. Wow. It's like a Stephen King kind of gig, but everybody shows up on snowmobiles.
On snowmobiles.
And they come down from Canada and Maine. I guess it's like, because there's nothing around it.
It sounds like an episode of Twin Peaks.
It did, very much, very much. I've heard really funny stories, but yeah. So did a lot of that. And then we did a couple national tours. And, we had some, we were playing colleges and had some success. And then that moved on. And then that gets me up to like 2008-ish. That band broke up. I had 5 years in that band. And I was like, man, I'm not going to dedicate the next 5 years of my life to sing. I was trying to find singers. So I started to like take some vocal lessons and learn about breath control and did an EP. a year later, I had I have a daughter who's now 14. So I've been at Jalen. She's awesome. So I spent the last 14 years basically producing bands and had 4 studios. And, I had 2 in New Hampshire and then 2 in Maine, 1 in Falmouth, and then the studio Portland. Right during the pandemic, I was about 6 months into it. In August 2020, I was like going stir crazy.
Time to do a studio.
I'm going stir crazy, and I knocked on the door, and I thought the studio was gone, because it was the word on the street it was, but it was. I met with the owner, Dave, there and started basically a 4-year remodel.
I think that's about when we met, right? I think, didn't we connect through email or something through the podcast?
Yeah, it was like maybe 21 or 2 or 22 maybe.
Yeah,
you connected Dave and I.
Yeah, right. And I was like, I think we connected and reconnected or something.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh, dude, you're in Portland. I love Portland. I was
that's
like,
right.
You need to meet Dave up there.
Yeah. And that's so wild that I met Dave, who was literally living 12 minutes from me through you.
Right.
Right. He's in Cumberland and I'm in Portland. And it's just funny. It just shows how this podcast you're doing connects the dots.
Right.
Yeah,
it's fun. And so Rockstar's Dave Godowski has been a guest on the show, and he's told us all about his work as an artist too, making records up in the Boston area.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also been with Isotope for a long time in Native Instruments. And,
yeah, Dave's the best.
Yeah,
thank you, Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And so speaking of which, since I just brought it up, are you is Isotope and Native Instruments, are those like tools that you ever use as part of your kind of workflow and production?
I every day, every session I have, I'm using Isotope. I love their dynamic EQ.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I use them every day. Like it's, if I had like a short form list of like plugins, because we got like that would be one that would be a subscription that I would definitely have.
Right. And that's for like music production, because you do a variety of stuff, right? You do audiobooks as well and voiceover and things like that.
Yeah, I've done a bunch, and I hadn't done any of those until the studio Portland, because there's a lot of actors that live on the coast of Maine. Surprisingly, there's lots of mind blowing how many people live. Well, you can see why it's so beautiful, but with the pandemic, a lot of them never left. They had places here and they just stayed and got rid of their spots in like
just
LA.
Stay up in Maine.
Yeah, like a lot of them moved up from California and up from New York City.
Yeah,
and they just stay there now. And they, instead of having a buddy of mine, who has become a buddy of mine, Xander Berkeley. He's a well-known actor. You've seen him in probably tons of movies, but it's great work with him. He's like, I get to come down here and work with you, and I don't have to fly to Burbank to go do 3 lines.
Right.
Like imagine getting on a plane, flying 6 hours to LA, and then trying to drive out to Burbank, which could be like another 6 hours if the traffic's bad, or 3 hours or whatever. Yeah. But but
that's doing voiceover stuff or ADR, right? Which is automatic dialogue replacement. Is that what it is?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's just basically where, it's loud on set. It's interesting. You watch a TV show or something or film and they're at a restaurant talking, you can hear everything perfect. It's like, what world's that?
Right.
You're usually in a bar or a restaurant and it's like 110 dB of just clanging going around the room. But so that's what we do. We just, punch in some lines.
I think about that every once in a while. I'm like, I keep thinking to myself, like, it would be super fun to just make a dumb little iPhone video and then just do my own voiceover.
Yeah.
And just for fun. I mean, you can probably just do that in a Instagram.
Oh, yeah.
Reel or whatever.
Yeah. And you probably get like a million views on it.
Ooh, I should do that.
Yeah. Just to do your own TikTok reel with just, voiceover. Make it be a little bit out of time too.
Yeah, make it a little bit bad so that it's funny.
Yeah.
Well, I've never done ADR work. I've done my first audiobook recently.
Okay.
And actually, we did a couple at the studio, but this last one, I was actually doing the engineering on it, and it was a whole new experience for me. It was fascinating.
Yeah.
I was nervous because I had heard audiobooks are a lot of work, but I think that actually probably comes from people who try to do everything all themselves or something like that, because I just did the recording.
Yeah, you didn't do the editing.
I didn't do the editing, no. So somebody else was taking care of the editing. But the recording aspect had a whole set of challenges. It was like, all right, how am I in the control room, checking the sound of the voice? How is the talent in an ISO booth that's super quiet? Mm-hmm. How am I like making sure there's no weird, funny sounds in there? And then how is the producer, all the way halfway across the country listening on a Zoom call, listening in, and how are we all talking to each other so that everybody can hear each other? Mm-hmm. And how do I set myself up as an engineer where I don't get caught in that awful world where you have to do 5 button pushes every time somebody wants to talk,
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying about the studio in Portland, and even doing the ADR. Like, so I'll have somebody in, one particular thing, I had somebody in London, Toronto, LA, New York, all watching in. And this was for a huge, talk about, trial by fire. This was like a big, I think it was the Lucasfilms one they did.
Wow.
And having those level of they do that. Like I said, if you had a room that was set up for it, all this stuff would be set up. But when you're at the beginning of the session, you got the talent coming in, it's nerve. I say, I still believe I would be more confident recording Paul McCartney with an orchestra than an ADR mic and 5 remote people. It stresses me out when I do it. I'm like, it always stresses me out, but especially with an analog console, you know what I mean? Like figuring out how to, route it all. But fortunately, a couple of years ago, Pro Tools went to the audio bridge.
Aux.io.
Yes.
So you're on an HDX system?
We have an HDX system there. Yeah.
Native Instruments introduces the new Complete 15 bundle featuring Contact 8, offering versatile synths, sampled instruments, and innovative effects. Perfect for creating everything from emotional scores to dance floor grooves. Contact 8 includes exciting new creative tools like chords and phrases for inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a hybrid instrument blending organic and synth sounds. The Complete 15 bundle also includes updated Massive X and Guitar Rig 7 Pro and AI-enhanced Isotope Ozone 11. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com. That's a big challenge. So one of the things I learned, at the risk of deep diving into this topic too much, but I think for any of you out there who are trying this or curious about it, these are some of the real challenges. With an HDX system, it means there's no latency in the headphones, so the artist can hear themselves clearly while they're doing something. At first, I tried to switch over to like a native core audio version of Pro Tools.
Oh, the native one, yep.
So that it would easily talk to Zoom and all that kind of stuff. But then the latency, I'm like, well, you can't work with latency like that.
Really? So you've had latency with that?
Well, yeah, if you do core audio, I mean, you're going to hear for a voice, you'll hear, even at 32 samples, you hear a latency in the headphones.
Okay, yeah.
You hear a little bit of a funny, phasey sound.
Yeah. I guess because you can still do the audio bridge on a regular Pro Tools subscription. That's where you do the route.
Right. So yeah, to complete that thought, I think where you're headed is with HDX, you need the Pro Tools. The Pro Tools works great in HDX, but it needs to talk outside of HDX to the apps like Zoom or whatever.
Because Avid hijacks, your whole audio interface.
Yeah, you kind of can't get in and out at the same, unless you use the Aux.io. So the Aux.io can bring the Zoom voice from the producer into the Pro Tools session. Yeah, I used it to bring my voice into the Pro Tools session too. Mm-hmm. And then it also allowed, so then the talent could hear me, hear the producer, and then my voice and the talent's voice were also feeding out of the Pro Tools session on audio movers, going to the producer, so the producer could hear me talking when I needed and hear the talent like high quality. Yeah. And then the producer muted their Zoom call. So a little bit complex, but as you can imagine, Rockstar's just like setting up for a session like that. You kind of pull your hair out for a minute until you got it, and then
it's confusing.
Do you ever go through this too? Like then after you did it, you're like, "Good Lord, I need to take some serious notes on how we did that." So next time when they call, they'll expect it to be ready in 5 minutes, and I have to remember how it all went.
Yeah, I after about 4 or 5 times, I smartened up and I just saved the template. I'm like, why didn't I do this before? Yeah, but I was, it was just like by the time we finished the first couple lines, I'm like, get me out of here. But once it goes through and you're done, you're like, all right, I got through that. And that's just like, that's what we do as engineers and producers. Like sometimes you just got to get through it, keep your composure, even when nothing's working and you've got like top producers around the world, movie producers, like scowling at you on Zoom, like, why?
Yeah, because they've got 1 hour for this thing.
Yeah. Well, there was one particular session where like things were kind of going weird and it had nothing to do with me. It was the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, fortunately, this was like one of my earlier sessions with my buddy Xander, and he kind of spoke up. He said, "Listen, this is because one of the guys on the thing was like, I don't know what's going on up there in Maine." I'm like, it's the internet, man. I couldn't do anything about it. And Xander gets on the mic and he goes, "Hey, just be easy. This is a legit recording studio here. This is the real deal." It was so funny. He said it and they kind of like chilled out a little bit, but it was nerve wracking,
Yeah.
But so
yeah, it's funny how stressful that stuff can be. And when you're doing remote sessions like that, it's in some ways it's more stressful because at least if you're in a room with somebody, you can just look at them, go, "Oh, just a moment," and take care of it. On the Zoom, when you're like trying to take care of something, but the thing you have to take care of might actually stop everybody from being able to talk to each other while you take care of it. And then you're like, I can't even tell them, hang on a second. Then you're typing a text message.
Or they're texting. Yeah, they're texting you. Yeah.
Well, cool. So you've done some of that stuff up at Studio Portland. Talk a little bit more about setting up the studio there. So I think you did some pretty cool stuff. Like did you put it in a console?
Yeah. So we moved in 2020 knowing, it was going to be a bit before we got open. So I spent some time when I first got in there kind of redoing the patch bays. The studio was built in 1985. So it's the longest running studio in the history of Maine. And so over the 4 years, we put in had a 1608 API, and then we went to a 2448. And then just recently in the last year, we upgraded to PMC monitors, I did all the new acoustic fabric in the building. Hadn't been changed since since 85.
Wow.
So it was like this really, really, it just kind of looked really grungy, like a oatmeal grunge,
right?
Oatmeal grunge. It was like an oatmeal grunge. And so we did all new carpets and just kind of refreshed the place. And before I did this, before this last year when we brought in the PMCs, I brought in an acoustician, said, all right, because it's like a classic room. It's a classic 80s, when they built this space, it was legit built out, know. So I brought in an acoustician and just said, hey, before I go doing all this, what is this room? We shot it and he said, hey, this room's good. You're within spec, And anyways, we brought in, I was working on the Barefoots for a while, which they were cool, but they were doing some weirdness in the room because of that side porting of the bass. So it was creating a valley at around 80 cycles. And,
I think that's a common place for a dip for near fields as well.
Yeah. And it was a huge trough. It was not, so anyways, ended up connecting with PMC, came down to Nashville, and went and met with them over there. And, finally got a pair of speakers that make sense to me. And they're just sitting in the room beautifully.
Are you guys thinking about stuff like Atmos mixing in the future?
I'm kind of hanging back on it. I think
one step at a time.
Yeah, I think it'd be cool. I don't think that room would be right. I mean, you could do it, but I don't know. I'm just kind of seeing where it all shakes out. You know. But I will just say, thanks to PMs, just like your speakers. When I just listened to a track that I mixed on those,
the Carl Tatz, Phantom Focus system.
You know what was amazing? That sounds exact. I could hear the exact mix that I did there. So that's cheers
cool.
to those.
So it
speakers.
Translated well.
It's exactly what I heard.
So we've got sibling studios. We've got two dual coast.
Yeah, I'll have to come down here and cut something.
Clients can go back and forth with their sessions and pick up right where they left off.
These PMCs are just it's like a speaker where you're not you don't have to learn the speaker. It's just the speakers there in the music, and that for me has been with the Barefoots, they have a sound and then you kind of learn the sound in there and other speakers. But
that's cool. So you've already had 3 consoles since you guys started remodeling the studio, or is that the long history of the studio?
Well, I had the 1608 in there initially. I brought that. I was in storage when I started in 2020. And then after a year and a half or so of that, we realized we needed a few more inputs because the place was set up for more input. So we get the 2448, which has been great.
That's awesome.
And then just like, some outboard extra channels if we need them. But
so what do you want to say about that? And that's the API, yeah?
Yeah, the API.
So what do you want to say about that as far as like what are the reasons to think about having a console in a studio? Where is it? Where are you like, thank God we got a console? And then where are the times where you're like, yeah, we didn't really need a console for this thing we're doing right now?
It's really about just like when you're trying to record a band, like, and like yourself, what you were saying about your studio, you have things to set up. You used to go to zero. Like, it kind of dawned on me that like, I want to have a room that's ready to go. And so I have the drums always set up. That was kind of the initial plan, is to have the drums always set up, everything ready to go. Yeah. And a console allows you to do that because I use the auxes off the console for headphone sends. Right. So I can get a band up and going, and I mean, under an hour, sometimes like half an hour, we can be recording. And because we bought a nice drum kit, I've got it always mic'd up, when I'm doing sessions there. So a band rolls in and they're like, whoa, if this is, providing a band shows up that's, tight and they're organized on what they're doing. Sometimes we're working through arrangements and that's different. But when a band shows up ready to go, they all just look around, they go in, they play, and they come back in and they hear the sound. They're like, whoa, amazing, Yeah. And so I just, I think that's the main thing with a console. And the other thing too is I really think there's something to be said for, some of my earlier studios, I had a lot of different preamps, and recording through the same preamps, was a thing that Ken Scott, I got from right Ken.
By using the same console for all the preamps and stuff, it lends a focus and clarity to the sound.
Yeah, it was interesting. Here we are at Blackbird, and he's like, we're tracking, and all of a sudden, that place is unbelievable. It's like Disneyland for recording, but. So we're getting set up, and all of a sudden they come rolling in this rack of like amazing, every preamp you've ever seen. And Ken goes, nope, just going to use the line amps on the console. And that was it. And then it came to do vocals. And then they rolled in like, some vintage 1073s and blah, blah, blah. And Ken, and they're like, Ken, would you like to check out these preamps? And these 2 preamps.
Right. It was Blackbird after all.
It was Blackbird. And
Did you go into the closet and see all the gear?
I mean, the rental side.
Yeah. You're just like,
it's like how many trailers.
Can I have one of those? Can I have one of those? Can I have one of those?
It's amazing.
It's like a kid in a candy shop.
Oh, it's yeah. I mean, that was the first time I ever heard an API console, like a recording through a console. And I was like, wow, that was a step up.
So that sort of inspired you to go that direction.
Yeah, because at that time I did have a great console, and and my buddy bought it out and was using it out in Western Mass. It was a DDA AMR, which was Dave Darien Designs, who started, I think Audient was his like, it moved on to be. But anyways, yeah, this, that was the first time. And then we went to do vocals with Ken, and they asked him again, and he said, nope, vocals are the same. So we use all API preamps. Wow.
So tell us a little bit about what you learned about Ken Scott.
What the big takeaway from that was, first of all, it was like how gracious and humble he was, and he was nervous about doing the session. I was nervous. John McBride was nervous about meeting Ken Scott. He's like pacing around. He's like, I can't believe Ken Scott's going to be here in a couple minutes. I'm already like butterflies and nervous. There's like a film crew around, and we're like,
you have to sing the right note.
And then we like finished writing the songs in the hotel the night before. And then like the band I brought down had never collectively played together. So we're all nervous. And then John's nervous. He goes, Ken's going to be here in 10 minutes. And he goes out, and then Ken gets there, and he's like, he says, he goes, these things make me so nervous. But so he was just everybody was like, he was so gracious and humble. But the main thing that, like, aside from like all his cool miking techniques was the pacing of the session. I think we've all been on sessions where you're like, you get like super fast Pro Tools ninjas, and they're just going 100 miles an hour, and there's a time and place for that. But what I noticed about the pacing with Ken was like, it wasn't hurried, but it wasn't delayed. But he would make decisions it just moved so smoothly, and like there was like one instance where, we worked on one of the tunes, and there was not acoustic guitar in there that had bright enough strings for the part. And so here we are, we've recorded the track. He wants to overdub, and he's like, I don't want to move on until we do this. So like, there was actually no strings at the studio. So they sent an intern out to get strings, and like 45 minutes later, he comes back with the strings. So we're like an hour just sitting there talking about like him recording, you know, I don't remember what it was, a David Bowie record. But then we get there, these strings, this old J200 up with the strings. And then my buddy Ryan Hummel went into the booth and literally played the intro. Like it was like 8 chords,
and it's
4 chords repeated twice.
Just right.
And he goes, all right, now we're moving on to the next thing. And it was like a whole hour went by.
That's hilarious.
But like the detail, it was really about the detail and about the pacing.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm sure I think that there's a time and place where like, if you're in a demo room and you got to write 4 songs by noon, you know, you got to go 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
But there's been times when I've been on sessions with like other engineers that come in and they pride themselves on speed. And I feel like it can like almost kind of lopside the session if everybody's feeling that, like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
Too much moving things fast. I mean, I can do that too.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely have been in places where I sort of like feel like I'm taking pride in
speed.
Like running, you know, a tight ship kind of thing.
Yeah.
Especially like as a Mainer, you would understand that, right?
Oh yeah.
The tight ship concept. But at the same time, it's not necessarily the best thing for every session. For some sessions, it's great.
Oh yeah.
And for others, it's like, oh, why blast through something that could have been, you know, carefully done just right.
Yeah. And I think really when, you know, and I do that too. Like there's sessions where you're like, you've got to move fast because the musicians are moving fast.
Yeah.
Like they're like, let's do this. And you're like, especially when it's like a session where you have players doing multiple parts and they're like, all right, grab me a baritone. Boom. Then you got to run around, do a baritone. Boom. And that's quick. But I think it was just interesting, you know, the pacing was really interesting. And like and it's so really, I think what it comes down to is like the detail was just amazingly.
Yeah. Now, was that a session that that Mark Rubel was part of putting together? So
yes, I see him up there in the corner. Yeah.
Tribute to Mark right here.
Oh man.
You guys can probably see him on the camera.
Yeah.
That guy.
He was the kindest.
Inspiration. Here,
yeah. Yeah. So he, and also Kevin Becca was there too for that session. Kevin
that's right. Yeah. Kevin also. Yeah.
But yeah, you know, so we were initially only supposed to be there for 3 days at the Blackbird session. And then it was like day 3 and Ken and John were talking like, hey, we're having so much fun. They said, can you guys stay for 3 more days? And we're like, yeah, we'll stay for 3 more days. But it was, at that point in my you know, recording engineer career, I think I was 6 years in on having a commercial studio at that point. And what I learned in 6 days of hanging around, just watching and being involved with that was I call it my 6 days of college. I think I learned more in those 6 days because, you know, at that point I had so much information in my head because of like YouTube and the internet. And
when you had so much experience as an artist and a songwriter already.
And an engineer for like 6 years
so
full time.
Yeah. So, right. So you understood a lot of the applications of stuff, like the why you might want to make something sound great, but through that experience, maybe it's like it was like connecting the final dots or something.
It was, and it was like a lot of clarity. Like I felt like way more confident, and I was a better engineer overnight or over 6 days, because all the things that fill our heads, like what we go to bed worrying about, you know, as an engineer, and like what we might focus on, what we don't focus on. There's just so much to think about, and like how Ken was just so focused on like, nope, yep, this is good. You know, don't worry about this. Focus on this.
Yeah. Like
one thing we did, like one of the songs we recorded is called "Falling Out of Trees," and so JJ, the drummer, is playing like this like incredibly expensive drum kit. And this was like I don't know if it's the first or second song we recorded, but like it's like this kit where you kind of want to get after it. And Ken's like, all right, you're just gonna play the hi-hat stand with a brush and a kick drum and a snare every once in a while. And it was just like
super minimal. Yeah.
It was like not even touching the kit. And then after that, he's like, okay, run around like, all right, I'm hearing this sound. And it ended up being some brushes on a notepad on a windowsill. And we went around the whole studio, and you're hitting this thing
until you could find the
right
tone.
That was like another half an hour maybe before, and he found it. It was like in Studio D. There's like a piano room, and like there's like this deep metal windowsill, and in there they mic'd the corner, and it was like, it's like, wow, that is actually really good.
That's cool.
Yeah,
it's fun to do stuff like that. It's fun to look for unique and original sounds in a space. Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound weak and distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift for you to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding a lot more like professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins and Pro Tools. And the best part is, these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus, Studio One, Reaper, or anything you can think of. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. You know, I would encourage you, rock stars, to try that too, where it's like we're so used to having these kind of standard instruments that we're striving to record to sound like what we've heard before. But I think it's easy to forget that, like, all you need is a microphone with the gain turned up, and you could discover an incredible array of sounds like, in the strangest places. You know, take your mic into the kitchen sometimes. This is the obvious, like banging on pots and pans, but even just hitting things like really quietly and just up close, you know, you can get tones, you can get bass out of stuff that you never would have thought had bass to it.
We did one where we were flicking a business card, and it sounded like a kick drum. And the way they were hitting it, it was like we've done some classes at the studio where
you guys are hosting educational classes up there.
And a part of the class was like, you can't use an instrument.
That's great.
Go pick a microphone and go create a snare. Go create a kick drum. And everybody went out, and one of the best kick drum sounds actually was like, there was a wall, and he's like, doo, doo. And it was just like this. So I got that like sample, and I use it all the time. And it's like this. I
forgot who told the story. Maybe it was David Thoner or something about being on a session where they needed to replace. It was a missing kick drum on tape, and somebody was just like, "Here, just give me that plug a 57 in," and they just plugged it straight into the track, and he just went boom. He just hit it, and it was like sounded like the kick was right in there. And then it reminds me too of doing a session with Matt Mahaffey at MTSU when I was a student there. And he brought in a vinyl record and was just like whoop 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 whoop, like as a percussion sound effect on a song and a track, and it sounded awesome, you know.
Yeah, and those are like the things that, like, I mean, there's a time and place for a standard big rock drum sound or whatever, but like, I mean, we live in a world right now musically where what I think is just amazing is like where sound design meets music, and like you get all these like cool, weird, strange things, and that's kind of, to me, that is like, that's where everybody starts high-fiving. It's like, wow, I can't believe I just kicked the bird cage, and it sounds like this amazing percussion or something. You know what I mean?
Kick the bird cage. Yeah. What was I thinking of? Oh yeah, there was that great YouTube video series. It's called like 5 Drummers in an Apartment.
Oh, I've never seen that.
If you've never seen that, go check that out. And I think they did a few of them, but it's like, they're like, you know, they're scripted things. So like you see these drummers like pull up all secretively and they're in a car, or no, you just see 5 people, 4 or 5 people, and they're in a car. And then a couple leaves the apartment and locks the door and walks away. And then they sneak in and they like pick the lock and they let themselves in. And then they just start going around from room to room, like making these amazing drum beats out of stuff that's in the space, and then they get out of there quickly before the old couple comes home.
Wow.
And you know, maybe they come back in and they're like, why is that kitchen cabinet still open, you know?
5 it sounds like a really cool joke of some sort. 5 drummers in an
it's definitely like a sense of humor, but it's just awesome.
All
right, cool. So one of the things I noticed about the Studio Portland, again, is that just looking at the website, in fact, let me see here. I'll try out the screen share here thing and see if I can get this to work very well.
Yeah, I know they're working on a new one. I don't know where we're at right now.
We'll see if my screen sharing skills are any good or if I just totally blow this. Let's see, that's the window. There's your website right there.
Oh yeah, my website. Yeah.
You can see how many tabs I've got open. That's the kind of effort we put into every interview, rock stars.
Yeah,
there's some of your stuff. You laid out your website. Well, maybe it's
there. It
wasn't coming. It's the internet being slow. That's what it is. You got like your about and then a player and videos and everything. And I thought that was cool.
Nature Valley.
Yeah, it's like anything you want to say about creating here. And I'll switch to. Let me see if it'll switch to a different tab for us or not. Oh yeah, it did. Great.
Yeah, they're doing a voice.
Yeah, so this is the Studio Portland, and I noticed that there's all these like options on here, which I thought was kind of cool. Like one says solo performer, another one says voice acting. There's like a quick session. Oh, I hope it's okay for me to show this on here, but indie artist stuff, a full day. Here, I can turn this back off now, but just like this idea of like having a multitude of things that can kind of keep the studio booked and going.
Yeah.
Talk about that. And you guys are doing the classes as well.
Yeah. So, I think, in 2024, where you can create anywhere as long as you have a microphone and a laptop. I think using a recording studio, as a like what can you use a studio for that you can't do at home?
Yeah.
And also helping educate people with home studios. Like a lot of the people I work with are like talented singer-songwriters or singer-songwriters that are just, they went out and bought a bunch of gear and they're just like frustrated. And so like a lot of work comes from that too. So I'll usually go help them get their place set up, and then they're like, I'm just going to come in and work with you. And they're like, oh, well, then they love just the studio. But then I'm trying to teach people how to maximize what they can do at home.
Right.
And a lot of it is like, for us, when you've worked in a lot of spaces and run around and done this for years, there's just mistakes that we've all made. And so trying to help people. So we've had some education classes that have gone really well. We're not doing it this year, but the last 2 years I did a 24-week program. And, we had,
wow.
Yeah, I had 24 weeks. We had, the first year I had like 8 full-time students. And then the second year was 11 or 12 through the year last year.
Wow. So that's a full 6-month program, is
yeah,
that?
Yeah. I did Monday and Tuesdays, 6 hours a day. And it was a lot of fun.
That's super cool. It's a cool thing to be able to have that kind of focus and dedication.
Yeah. And it's
a whole class like that.
Yeah. And a lot of it was too, because I get a lot of calls from, a lot of emails from people that have just graduated from colleges, and they're like, I need some real world experience.
Right.
And I was like, man, I wish I could, but I can't have 30 interns. It
Right.
just didn't work out. So I'm like, well, why don't we just create something that is affordable? And so a lot of the stuff we did, it was, we bring in real sessions,
Right.
Sometimes it was actually the ADR stuff, as long as it was cool for some of them you can't have because all this,
because of NDAs
and stuff,
yeah.
But some of them were fine. Podcasts and stuff were good, but like a lot of it is like real world experience. It's like, all right, you can learn all this technical stuff, but in a real world situation, it's a lot different than what some people think it is.
Right.
It's like troubleshooting, like you said, like everything's fine until it doesn't work, and which is, common on certain.
So lay out some of that concept a little bit, because that's a really cool idea. And for those who have a studio and they're trying to figure out how to keep the studio going more,
Mm-hmm.
My studio, I get messages from interns, and there are many times where I'm like, I've had it work, but then there's other times where I'm like, I just can't, there isn't enough room for it, or I can't keep doing it. I couldn't do it for a certain reason. But the idea of like combining the two things, where it's like, it's a chance for people to learn something in the studio. It's a chance for you to already be having a session of some sort going on.
Yep.
And then it's also a chance as a studio to affordably and sensibly train future engineers and producers who might want to come back. Now they understand and know the studio. Now they can come back and book it and run their own sessions. What do you need? What have you learned about like having enough space for that? What works? What doesn't work? If people wanted to try that somewhere else.
I think the takeaway, so exactly what you said is like training people so that, hey, especially the studio in Portland, is like, here's a commercial spot. Because before that, there's like a handful of studios around there's a bunch of talented producers, engineers in town, but they have their own spaces that are more like custom to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the idea with the studio was, all right, let's have a proper studio here with a patch bay. Everything works that you plug in. And so train people how to use the space so they can come in and they can, instead of being like, like me spending 10 years of my life to get an API, they can be like, I can just come down and use one. And that's what's beautiful about Nashville. You got so many studios. So the idea is that train up some people so, you get to know them over 12 or 24 weeks. So you know who's like, and everybody that's come through the classes have been awesome. There's never been like, I would never leave this person in here alone, but it's always been really good people.
Right. Well, there's also a thing to be said for offering something that people purchase a ticket to. So now people are like, personally, even if it's a inexpensive class,
right?
People are personally invested in it, so they're more likely to take it seriously.
Yeah, exactly. So so we've done that, but I think the takeaway, I think that so we're doing the 24-week programs. I think the thing that if we do more of them, and right now, like I said, we have new partners and they're kind of doing some things. Got the voice acting class coming out, and I think offering for any studios out there doing this is maybe offering different style classes, because like you might have someone in the room that's just they want to do like more pop production or hip hop production, which is like a different thing than tracking live bands. So that was like the takeaway. If we do more classes, they're going to be more focused. Like one of the classes I was thinking of doing is like a modern songwriter. That's like somebody that can effectively take a microphone and a laptop at home, play to a click track or some kind of rhythm track, and then come to a studio and be able to book it out and do their drums and do whatever they got to do, and then go back and then spend the next 3 weeks doing guitar solos if they choose to, which some people do, or obsessing about the finite details, which would chew up a lot of money in the studio. So like this idea of like, how can I effectively be on a laptop in Starbucks and then be at Lij's studio cutting drums, and they're not going to be like, man, this feels janky and out of time. So a lot of like, I do a lot of this, like, teaching people how to, just like tricks on how to not get paralyzed by options and playing and working on your time and
You mean teaching somebody who's a drummer, or teaching somebody who's going to produce a session with a live drummer and they just don't have that experience yet?
It kind of like more like a producer, from a producer songwriter angle, someone that's like playing, because
who's playing the instruments.
Or somebody that is a songwriter and they're like, man, I can never like, I can never record something that I feel like I should take it to a studio, or, the idea that you're always continually moving forward.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? On something.
Well, it's tricky when you're doing, we can talk about this for a minute, for the self-producing artist, where you're playing all the parts. It's a lot of fun to do because you can instantly know what you mean. You know what I mean? Like an internal conversation is like, what your intention is, so you can play the same part on a different instrument. You can match things up. You can go after an idea, but it's also difficult because you lack that ability to, like if you play drums while somebody's playing guitar and somebody's playing bass and somebody's singing, when a band plays together, there's this collaborative thing where everything hopefully shifts into place musically and adds up in a really good way. But when you do it all yourself, it's like you're just like trying to build this part of the house, and then you're trying to build this part of the house, and then that one, and then you're like, you get in there and you're like, oh, I hope this goes together. Or, you played this instrument this way and then this one, and they couldn't adjust to each other because they didn't happen at the same time.
Yeah. There's definitely, that being said, I don't think there's anything better than, well, there's times when, a solo situation's better, but like whenever you can get in the room with great players and play live, to me, I'll always, that magic is just, that's magic, when that happens. But, like a simple thing, like let's just say like you have a song and it's like a petty song, and it's a straight driving.
I did write down Ryan Ordway. Now I'm coming back again. It's got a Tom Petty vibe.
Oh yes, yeah. People refer. I get that, and I get a little Jerry at times too. My crackly voice or whatever.
Oh, nice.
But
Deadhead.
Yeah, I got to see him once.
I saw him 5 times.
Nice.
One of them was in Maine.
Yeah, I saw him at Highgate, Vermont. Dylan and the Dead. It was really wild. That's another story. But like say for instance, like you're using Easy Drummer. Like every time I've like in through the years, like you get one of those apps and you would get in there as a songwriter and you try and like create a whole drum part for every section. Well, what I've done on some songs is like not obsessing about every little hit and all that stuff on the, like, sometimes you just get a straight, like,
just let it be a straight beat.
And you just play to that, because that's going to be a lot more musical to a singer-songwriter than a click track. So build it, even if you, and then just knowing you're gonna throw it out, and then the drummer's going to play to that. Like, that right there tricks you, and then also sometimes and I love all those tap to find, like, features you can do in those, and I can do something really quick where, like, if you came to me and you're like, hey, I got a song, we could do a mock-up drum track in probably 15, 20 minutes.
Give us some tips on that. I love that stuff, and I've always struggled with it, to be honest.
Yeah,
like,
me too.
I'll mess around with Easy Drummer or Superior Drummer or any one of those things, and I'll find this beat. I'm like, that's pretty cool, and then I'll watch the videos and I'll learn, like, oh, here's excuse me, I can clear my throat.
Yeah, no
worries. But here's where you go find the fills. But then I'm like, yeah, but that's not what I'm hearing in my head.
Yeah.
Is there a way to make the program drums, follow what you're feeling in your head, the same thing you would air drum to the drummer? Like when you're a guitar player, you just air drum it to the drummer. You're like, kind of like this, and then the drummer plays it or whatever. You know? And then they play something, you're like, oh no, that's better.
Yeah, I mean, what I do is, and I'm not deep on it, like, because the whole idea is, like, don't get too deep. But if you can, like, sometimes you have, something in the library that's like close. And if it's really close and it's not distracting you, and often it's the simpler the beat, the better. And then sometimes I'll, like, play a loop and I'm like, oh, whoa, that was a cool little fill. And then I'll take that and then I'll just start, like, Legos, putting things together with the idea that, like, I'm not trying to obsess about this. The idea is to move fast. And if you can play to it, and it's, and then even if, like, I've been playing to a click track for 25 years. So like I can, and a lot of times for my clients, I'll do the initial track while we're building it if we're going to bring drums in later. But I think the thing is like, if you're a newer songwriter and you're at home, I think the idea is that, like, don't be afraid to start practicing with something like that. Play as much as you can to, like, an Easy Drummer loop.
Right.
Use them. If you can find something, try and create. There's ways you can slice them and pull in different samples. Sometimes it's like it's a drum fill from, like, a totally different genre. It could be like a pop fill and I'll just kind of snap around. But and then what sometimes happens is you find a drum loop that does something that you wouldn't even thought of, and then it influences you to play in a certain way, and then you bring a drummer in to play on it. And my buddy JJ will be like, oh, that's a great part there. And then he'll comp it and then morph it in. But I just think if you can find, and now you got splice and all these different loop-based things. So, like I said, I haven't gotten really deep, but it's just basically, there's times where you'll find it. And here's the rule too, is, like, if you start going down the road and you're not finding something, abort mission, just get out. And because otherwise you're going to be paralyzed.
Yeah, and as a songwriter, you feel that it's like you just want to get the song going.
Yeah.
You don't want to get too stuck on a detail as you're trying to get rolling. It's like, let's get to the vibe.
Yeah, clicking MIDI notes.
Yeah. And so, like, it's just good to hear that advice too. It's like, don't get hung up on trying to create the perfect drum part. Go for the thing that's going to work, especially if you're going to, like you say, if you're just going to bring in another drummer later, they'll sort that out too.
Yeah, just something to help you keep time.
If you feel the guitar wanting to do changes that the loop drum isn't doing, you just do them anyway. Well, the live drummer can,
or sometimes I'll drop the loop out if it's something there, or maybe I'll program a little hit, or just even something, or
fake it out a little bit.
Just go to a click, da 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 da, and then boom. Yeah. Whatever you got to do, I'll just chop it out, and and that's helped me a lot, especially and I started doing this more so during the pandemic,
right?
Because before the pandemic, I was pretty bad with, I never used MIDI because I always would just bring in players,
Yeah.
So I was never, but I guess the glass half full of that is I became really, pretty efficient with.
Yeah, I think everybody hunkered down with their gear for a minute to just try and figure some stuff out.
Yeah, yeah.
iZotope is truly amazing for mixing and mastering your music, like the new iZotope Plasma plugin, featuring flux saturation, which helps you sculpt the harmonics in your sound, enhancing the excitement and clarity of your tracks and mixes. And Ozone, with its built-in mastering assistant, helps you analyze your mix, suggesting all the settings you need for a professionally mastered result based on your chosen style of music and EQ curve, or reference a specific song if you want. Ozone features sophisticated yet simple modules like clarity and impact, low-end focus, stabilizer, imager, exciter, and spectral shaping, along with powerful dynamic EQ, compression, and limiting, allowing you to adjust the settings to your taste so it sounds incredible. And with the magic of master rebalance, you can even manipulate the vocal, bass, and drums separately at the mastering stage. Use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off Plasma, Ozone, RX, or any of the fantastic plugins at iZotope.com. Howdy, rock stars. We're back now for the jam session, aka the second half of the show. My guest today is Ryan Ordway, joining us here at Recording Studio Rockstars. So glad to have you here, dude. You ready to jam?
I sure am.
All right. So you were talking about, we're going to get into some how-to stuff on recording here, but to close up this idea of running a studio and having, you know, all these variety of things happening and organizing stuff and managing students coming and going and all that. Do you feel like that is very doable for like the solo studio owner, or do you find that that really helps when you sort of level up a little bit and start to have somebody managing the studio and other people who come in and teach and, you know, like sort of having a little bit more of a staff on board?
You know, I think both can work. It depends on how much you're trying to do, I guess, as a solo studio. But definitely having, you know, which is new for me in the last 4 months or so, is now there's a team partners there at the studio that are doing more of the day-to-day, keeping up with stuff, because it's, you know, Portland's kind of is a hot happening scene, and is a lot of people are moving there, and you know, I think to do anything well, you definitely need to have a crew of at least, or a couple people that you can lean on. Yeah. You know, because
you can lean on me.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm trying to, especially for myself, because like I'm like the songwriters, I producer, I work with all the different artists on every level. Yeah. So trying to keep track of like everything from like QuickBooks to like, you know, everything. Something's gonna fall. You know, something's gonna be a little bit lacking.
What's some stuff that you've learned about that? Like, what are some tools? So QuickBooks is one that you guys might use for effectively keeping track of payments and invoices and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the team's using now, but I know they're struggling with that too, like just things not working at times.
Yeah, I use it, and I find it's like there's some benefits and there's other ones that are a pain. And then also it's like, it's kind of like being a beginner in a DAW and jumping straight into Pro Tools, or even Reaper for that example. Yeah. For example, which is one I'm learning now. When there's so many features in something, you're just like your head spinning. You're like, I just needed to do this simple thing.
Yeah, you know, I went around and around trying to find an app to do it all, like, you know, all the different calendars kind of things. Yeah. And it's like, there's yet to be one that does everything that you want. That's simple. It's like does all these weird things, but you know, whatever. I think for everybody's, if you can just, you know, I would have to say, find whatever you can function with. And
so what about calendar stuff? What did you find useful for that?
You know, we ended up just going, I spent so much time on this one app trying to build out this whole like system. And we spent months kind of getting it integrated, and then we just got rid of it. And I went back to a Google Calendar and just like simplified, because it was just too overly done. It's sort of like, I tried to automate it all, you know, like, and the idea of I think trying to have your website be like Amazon for like services. I had this grand idea that I was going to do that. And I spent all this time putting it together, trying to integrate it all, only to be like, this sucks, you know, talking. And I went back to Google Calendar, but you know, I think there's some good ones. You use Calendly. What do you want to use?
Calendly is one that I use for scheduling the podcast. And actually,
that's good.
Similarly, I hit a point where I was working with, you know, certain artists that I've got a great working relationship with. Yeah. And they're asking me about like, hey, when can we get back in and everything? And I don't know if you have ever felt this, but like, you know, you bust your ass all day on a session, you get to the end and you're like right up against the moment where it's like, session's got to be done. We got to walk out, lock the door because I have to start my next thing right then. And then the artist's like, hey, when are you available again? And you're like, oh God, I don't even have time to sit and look at the calendar and try and figure that out and answer that question now. So I was like, you know what would happen if I just book a session day and, throw that in Calendly.
Yep.
And it worked. I was able to just give it to some artists where I'm like, here, just when you want to book some, just book it.
Yeah.
And then I just see that we've got a day booked, and then, then there's a fear that like, oh, but what if that breaks? What if this, what if that? And I'm like, a lot of my attitude is like, why don't you just try it and see if you break it? And if you don't break it, then it works, Yeah. It's like the opposite of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There's if it ain't broke, I guess that is if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? You try something, and then if it doesn't break it, you can do it. But like, and to just finish that thought, what I found is like, sometimes they book something and it is broke. So the automated calendar thing absolutely 100% breaks.
Mm-hmm.
And the solution is don't sweat it so much unless it's a big problem. If it's a small problem, then you apologize to somebody. You go, man, I'm so sorry. It was a calendar fail.
Yeah.
I'm booked that day. Can we just reschedule to a different time? So then as the studio person or as the podcast host, it's on me to just sort of like look ahead enough to give people a heads up. So it's not, you don't want somebody like changing their whole schedule and scheduling musicians and stuff. And then you're like, oh, I can't do it that day.
Yeah.
You don't want to happen.
Flying in.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm here at your door.
Oh man.
When's the session start? You're like, oh, I'm sorry, man. My kid's got a soccer game today. I can't do it.
Yeah. So I guess that's a learning process still, but
so Calendly, there's another one I just got and I've already forgotten what it's called. Oh, TidyCal.
Oh,
that was a inexpensive one that you can buy once for a lifetime, a one-time charge. And it's over on AppSumo is the website. So if you're curious about that, you can go check that out. And then, Google Cal. Like if you really sit down and learn
the back end,
those tools, they actually work really well. You can do a lot with them.
Yeah, and have them all talk to each other. So I still got to get better with it. But like I said, now there's a team doing that at the studio. And so I'm kind of.
What does that mean, talk to each other? You mean like, does that mean you can do things like put something in the Google Calendar and then it will automatically create documents in a folder that are ready and waiting for you kind of stuff?
I mean, and the other thing too is like a lot of like the Calendly, whatever the one you use, those all will connect to Google Calendars.
Right.
So, which is the most common one I see, the Google Calendar will connect to most of these apps. It seems like to be the preferred one versus the Apple Calendar or whatever. So I noticed that like, it seemed like no matter what, if I use Google and no matter what I go to for other software, most of those line up. So you can kind of go between, if you're used to just using Google, you can go between these other apps and they all talk to each other and give you warnings and or alerts as to what's happening, or also like invoices, like having one that will to send out a reminder, some of these, and so
Yeah, that's been a frustration with QuickBooks is it doesn't seem to send automatic reminders, or at least I haven't found that yet.
Yeah, or they've paid and yourself. Or if they've paid and they send out another reminder after.
Right, and then they're like, I already paid this.
He's like, what's going on?
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, and you're like, no.
Yeah. So, all right, so let's see, jumping forward from there, any other like studio management stuff that you feel like is important to talk about? Like, what about communication with, potential sessions, inquiries as they come in?
Yeah.
Have you found that like emails is a great tool for operating a studio? Do you think it's just like, dude, just put your cell phone number up on the website, or is that a terrible idea? What stuff have you learned about that kind of stuff?
I think what it comes down to, like in my journey, I don't remember what the name of the app was, we're trying to like automate everything.
Mm-hmm.
There's certain things like services at your studio that I think is like, you should have just on your website. And I think there's still work at the studio. We're still working on a new website and all that stuff. And we're just kind of throwing stuff up to see what's sticking and catching but like, I think having like basic things on there ready to go, like, a mix or something like that. But what I always find is like, if you have your website kind of looking like an Amazon store, I think you're going to lose more people than people want to talk to you, especially when it's about art.
Right.
You know what I mean? if someone's like, wants to create something, I don't think there's anything that they want to talk to a human that is going to put some passion into their project. And I feel like having the site too Amazon-y, not knocking Amazon or whatever, but like the idea of like, I don't know, I seem like the human, like whenever like the bigger projects line up, they never just go on the website and book a, $10,000 project.
Right.
It just doesn't happen like that. There's like, it's like dating and, and so I feel like finding something like the redundancies, things that are like people will just go on and book and they know you or they know what they, I think having just a small menu and then a person to talk to them.
Well, there's a lot to be said for that too. I mean, I think when you're creating stuff, you want to feel understood. I mean, you also feel like what you're trying to do is, and it often is unique, hopefully it's unique. That's what makes it original. And so like, you want to make sure that people understand like what you're trying to do and find out if they can actually help you do that. Because the last thing you want to do as an artist, as a creator is like jump into something and spend money, commit, your limited budget into a process that you're just like, well, that didn't work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so like talking to somebody, and then on the flip side, I feel like the most powerful tool you have, far more powerful than a website, is your ability to have a conversation with somebody. Yeah. I know for me, I found that if somebody's curious about doing a session, the first move is I just start asking questions.
Yeah. 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 And just be there listening. And I think that's kind of what's kept me working through the years is exactly what you said, is like, I'm genuinely get excited about working with artists. It doesn't matter where they are on their journey,
Yeah.
But just being able to communicate and then understand and like, being like a musical psychiatrist, you just listen and say, all right, this is what I'm kind of thinking, but not, somebody comes in and says, I want to sound like this, but not like this. And then you're just like, you just kind of navigate. You just
keep asking questions.
You keep asking and then you just kind of keep like, it's interesting. Like, so it's about, this is very much, it's all about the hang. It's about being able to understand. It's about being able to like, not have an ego.
It's like there's so many opportunities for me to presume in those conversations, like, this must mean that, or like, this person, they don't know what they're asking. They, they really need to be asking this or something. But inevitably, like I keep rediscovering over and over again that like there's valuable stuff to be learned from people in these conversations when you're doing a session. I mean, I just did a session with an artist, and it would have been very easy for me to presume that like maybe he didn't really have any experience and didn't know what he was doing with this thing. But instead I learned to just roll with it, try and deliver the best thing. Like artists are very good at saying something. And as a producer and engineer, you're like, that sounds nuts. You're telling me to do all this and go in that crazy direction. And like that, none of that's going to work. But often they, it's just the communication that's the gap,
Yep.
But like with this particular artist I was working with, came in and I'm like trying to swap out compressors because I was so proud of my new patch bay. I just got my patch bay all wired up by Ben Sabin over at Trace Audio, and it's awesome. And I haven't had, some of the compressors there where it's so easy to just go like, let me hear this one. Yep. Let me hear this one. Let me hear this one, like almost like swapping plugins.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, I'm all excited about that. And the artist is here. And then I'm like thinking, hey, let me know if one of these sort of appeals to you in the headphones, because he's doing for the voice. And I don't try and give, I don't want an artist to have like, option paralysis.
Right.
But I do think sometimes giving them a chance to like, hey, do you like this? Does this feel better to you in the headphones versus that? That can be good. But I'm doing that. And then he says like, hey, I don't know if I like that. Maybe let's not use any compression. And there's this internal part of me that was like, whoa, what are you talking about? No compression on the vocal. Are you nuts? And then instead of just following that and trying to convince him, I was just like, okay, cool. So we cut it. It was the Roswell Pro Audio Aztec mic, this beautiful tube mic that's new for me in the studio. And in fact, you probably are hearing me talk about it on this podcast on some of the intros.
Oh, yeah.
But but that mic going through the Spectra 1964 STX 100D 500 series mic pre. So it's just a great mic through a great mic pre, and it sounded incredible. And then afterwards I'm like, shit, how do you forget stuff like that? That like, it's just like you talking about simplifying the complexity of booking the studio.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes just the dumbest, simple setup can sound so great. Granted, if he started yelling in the middle of the song, it probably wouldn't have worked. But, but he completely sang it the right way. And then I cut the background vocals that way too. And it just sounds gorgeous.
Yeah. When it's when you have the right player on an instrument, on a microphone, most often you don't really need a compressor unless you're looking for a character. Like we've got a bunch of compressors at the studio, and I find that I've been recording, because of the drummer my buddy who I've been playing with for years, he does a lot of the session work for me. He just hits the drums so even and so smooth and so pro that like, if we're going for like just like you want it right up close and you want to feel it, it's like I haven't been using lots of compression, and then there's times where like, hey, let's bury something, and I'll always do like a character mic on the side, but yeah, it's true. Sometimes like, Al Schmidt, I don't think he ever really used compression. I've heard. I think he would always ride the fader.
Yeah, and maybe Bruce Swading too.
Yeah, like and I can understand that because like when you, but then there's times when you run through, the 610s or whatever.
Yeah,
and they just amazing.
They're like the best all amazing colors for your paint palette, But it's just a good reminder to keep rechecking it at home base. Like, what's the simplest thing I can do? And what's that like, Rock your music production with the updated Complete 15 bundle from Native Instruments, featuring the new Contact 8. This comprehensive collection includes a fantastic range of versatile synths, sampled instruments, and innovative studio effects, giving you everything you need to bring your music to life. Whether you're composing emotional scores, deep dance floor grooves, or experimenting with sound design, Complete 15 has you covered. Discover powerful plugins and instruments that guide you from the initial idea all the way through to the final mix. The included Contact 8 introduces exciting new tools like chords and phrases for instant inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a cutting-edge hybrid instrument that merges organic and synth sounds in real time. Plus, enjoy revamped versions of Massive X and Guitar Rig 7 Pro to take your sound to the next level. Then polish your mixes off with the AI-enhanced Isotope Ozone 11 included in Complete 15 bundle. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com. It's like the times where I've had a whole fancy studio set up with patchback and route stuff through stuff, into a fancy Pro Tools rig. And then sometimes I'd be like, oh, just for a quick video check or something, I'm just going to take one mic cable, go into an interface plugged into a laptop out in the studio. And then later I'll hear that and I'll be like, God damn, that sounds good.
Yeah. Yeah. Through like an Apollo or something.
Yeah. Like no stuff in the way,
Yeah.
So it's just great reminders. Let's talk about you setting up for a full band session. Whether it's, let's talk about your music. So when you're setting up to do a Ryan Ordway record and you got a band in the studio, what are let's just describe the basics of like, where do you put the musicians? Where do you put the amps? What kind of environment gives you great sounds that you like? Isolation, non-isolation, headphone mixes, just kind of describe it.
Well, particularly in the studio Portland, man, it's amazing like how much I can put in that room and get such great isolation, just in the room all live together. But typically, so on drums, whatever I do, the classic kick in, like a Shure Beta 52 or D12 or whatever. Yeah. Yeah. And then I'll do an outside sub kick, and then up the middle.
Well, sub kick like one of the Yamaha actual sub kick mics.
Yeah, one of those.
Have you like actually made one out of an NS10?
I haven't made one yet, but I did make one years ago. But yeah, we just got one of the sub kicks. I think I can't remember what we got 2 of them there. I can't remember what my model is, but I'll do that on the outside, and I'll keep the especially with JJ on drums. If it's somebody that's crashing and bashing, I'll stick that mic in just a little bit in the hole, right? To keep the cymbals out of the inside. And you'll be glad
you got that compressor too.
Yeah, right. So, but for the most part, what I've been doing lately, and I've been loving it, is I'll just keep it right outside the hole, exactly in line with the sub kick. So it's like
another one. Oh, the beater mic.
The kick in, we'll call it.
Right.
And I'm just lining those up.
So the kick in is actually kick out.
Yeah, it's kick in, kick out, but it's just something
it's catching the air coming out of the hole.
Yeah, for more like Americana, like rock and roll sounds.
Right.
If it's like a more like metal track, obviously you'll stick
then
that
you
in
want
there.
to get in close to the
but
beater,
I would just try and keep those for the most part. I'm doing a lot of singer-songwriters, rock and roll kind of stuff. So that stuff's usually good.
Yeah, but it's great to hear the variety too, because that's what our takeaway is. That's what we want to hear. We want to like, okay, if I do this session, I'll try this. If I do this one, I'm going to do that. Because the more you engineer on a record too, the more you find yourself in those situations where it's like, people come in with totally different styles and they just want you to get the right sound.
Yeah. If you got a basher on cymbals, get it in the hole there, Yeah,
because otherwise the cymbals are getting in the kick mic.
Yeah. And there's amazing plugins out there to get rid of it. Why would you want to have to,
Yeah, there's also the greatest cymbal plugin is you walk over to the drums and you just remove the cymbals from the drum kit.
I have I don't really like cymbals. Yeah, I like them when they're played right.
Yeah.
But even like with my music, like I'm like just kind of, I only treat them like every once in a while, like don't like too much. And there's times when you need the, a lot of cymbals or like, but yeah, so I'll do two on the kick in, kick out, try and keep them as close together as possible. I'll do the classic, like, whatever, the microphone that goes into between this kick and the snare.
Oh, right. Yeah. Some people call it
what's his name?
The dick mic or something like that.
Or that guy from what's his name?
The center mic. The Dap Kings mic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Al Evans, who's been on the podcast multiple times, he sort of hit me to that the first time.
Yeah, actually, Al, I got to reach Al.
And Jason in St. Louis. Apologies for not giving the full title of the studio, Jason, but he was showing me the way. Actually, Jason, you need to come on the podcast if you're listening to this. He was showing me the way he mic'd up the drums, and it was some of the greatest drum sounds I've heard recently. I just heard him up there. Really amazing sounding. But he was talking about like a Royer 121 right in that spot, right above the top rim of the kick. So it's pointing towards the drummer's crotch, kind of, and then also away over the top of the kick drum, and it sounded amazing.
So kind of facing okay, this way, yeah?
Yeah, so like the figure eight is sort of, the rejection is rejecting the beater below it. And rejecting the cymbals above it and around it,
I'll have to try that because we got a Royer.
Right.
But yeah, it's Al. So Al and I were texting with each other this past spring. I got to get back in touch with him because like I'm hoping to get you get Al up to the studio to do we were talking about maybe coming up and doing like a master class or like a recording series of some sort.
Right, because you guys aren't too far away.
Yeah, he's like Western Mass. But so Al, I got to call you back. Sorry, man. This summer kind of got tangled up in life. But yeah, so then I'll do your typical like a Coles 4030 over the center. Mono microphone.
Yeah.
Is an overhead. And then I'll do, I've been using the two Soyaz, I think it's the 013s, small condensers. They're actually Godowski's microphones. So I'll do center microphone over the top, the ribbon, two
small diaphragm.
Too small, yeah. And then I'll do.
And are those sort of meant to be matched distance to the center ribbon? So they're like the same distance?
Yeah.
So they're all in phase. It's more like instead of a left right, it's like a left center right.
Yeah, left center right, and I'll get
above the kit.
Then they'll all be exact difference distance. I kind of do the center of the kit, just off to the right of the snare. I'll hold a tape measure.
So the snare in those overheads should sound like it's a little off, slightly off center, like it actually is on the kit.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing,
Yeah.
But so I'll take a tape measure, and you can, like the thing you can hook on your pocket.
Yeah.
I kind of hook that kind of on the side of the snare, and then I just pull it out and measure it that way. And then also, when I do one out in front of the kit, I'll try and get, sometimes, depends on the session. If it's like something where I need a real close drum sound, I will, that's not possible to get the microphone out in front of the kit that same distance because it's just too close. But if it's like 40 inches or so up, I'll do that. And then I'll also put one out in front, like a nice big condenser out there.
Yeah.
Or like a,
So a mono sort of ambient mic in front of the kit. Where do you find is a useful place for that mic? And also, how big is the room we're talking about?
Is
this a room where the drums easily breathe into the whole space, or is it a little bit?
Yeah, this room is it's like 32 by 20 or something like that.
Oh, that's a big space. Yeah. So that's a lot of room for drums.
Yeah. It's like, I think it's 32 wide. I think it is. I just measured it. I should know, but it's a big room, but it's also not like, it's not too big. It's not too live.
Right.
It's like this perfect, like, it's really, really a great sounding room.
So you could cut strings in there too. And everything.
Yeah. We can get, we got a piano in there.
Or a choir or something like that.
Yeah. I mean,
vocal ensemble.
It could be a little bit like, if I was going to build a new room, I would add probably about 20% more distance on the width, hypothetical, but it's a great size. It's a good size room. And then I've been using 57s on the toms.
Really?
Yep. 57s.
What do you like about 57s on the toms?
Their rejection to the cymbals is better than like 421s. 421s are harsh. At least
really?
The cymbals, if you like put a 421 up, this is what I've noticed, and then you use an S57, it's like, it's smoother sounding than the 421s. While I like the sound of the 421s, I don't like how the cymbals sound in them. I
need to try ribbons sometimes and just see if the figure 8 can reject the cymbal. I haven't really gotten that deep into that.
Yeah.
Trying to trick everything out.
And nowadays we got ribbons that can handle all the sound pressure levels. I'd like that too. I like darker.
I've got the Alder Audio ribbons, and those things are kind of, I mean, I don't want to jinx anything, but they're pretty indestructible compared to my Coles.
Yeah.
The Coles, I open it and then I'm like, maybe not today, and I close it again. I'm just like, I don't want to blow it.
I just realized that Fraser, do you know about independent audio up in Portland?
You mean is Fraser Mercenary Audio and all that?
No, not Mercenary. It's called Independent Audio. It's right in Portland, like 3 blocks or so from the studio. But Fraser does all the he like distributes like Coles into the country, and so he's actually, I think he delivers to like all the like the Vintage Kings and Sweetwaters.
Oh, cool.
Right in Portland.
Oh, so he's the distributor to bring Coles 38s in.
Yeah, and a bunch of other gear. But I didn't realize he brought me over a microphone cover and said that, even because I just had the Coles just out all the time. He's like, you got to cover that, and I wasn't covering it forever, just kind of. I guess he was still
covering it while you move it around.
Or just while it's even sitting there.
Yeah.
He said just because the air pressure in the room from it can wear it out.
Well, that and the fact that the magnet's so strong, it actually attracts like iron particles in the air and stuff like that. They float up to it. So I always put a little plastic baggie on it. And then the similar trick I learned was when you put it in the case, put it in a plastic baggie before you close the case, because the pressure of the case closing and opening can potentially damage it. So what I did once was my ribbon was already blown. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to see if I can fix this myself before I go through all the shipping it out and doing all that. Because I had fixed an old RCA Junior, 44 Junior, and I was like, holy shit, it works and it still sounds cool. So I was feeling bold, and I carefully unscrewed it and I lifted the top off. No, I didn't fix the Coles myself. But what I did do is I saw that ribbon in there and I moved the mic around, and I was like, holy shit. It was like watching a spider's thread like waft in the breeze. And I was like, wow, no wonder this thing is, you got to be so careful with it. Yeah. And I don't know if it was because it was already sort of damaged or if that's just the way it is too. But it made me realize, like, okay, you got to be like, you really want to be careful with that mic when you're moving it about.
Yeah, and you don't want to be like on a lot of espresso when you're trying to switch out the ribbon.
Yeah, and if somebody wants to sing on it, no pee-pops. Don't let them get up on that mic without a filter on it or something to block any airflow. Yeah. And you can't put Coles down low. You can put it in front of a drum set, and it sounds great, but don't put it, you need to make sure that you don't feel any air coming out of the kick drum where you put it, because that will take out the ribbon in a second. Unless you put a pop filter in front of that, and then that can help.
Yeah, I think I've been really, I probably should treat it with a little bit more sensitivity.
Well, I mean, and I was just using mine on lots for years, and then, then you blow it, and it's like, It was like $400 to ship it and get it re-ribboned or something.
Yeah,
so
I got a couple mics.
I just decided to save it for the special moments.
Yeah, well, I love those microphones. I just like a darker overhead for the most part with like rock and roll or like when, and then obviously there's times where like, but I got to tell you, those Soyas are just beautiful sounding, microphones. So, and those are just all spaced out. And then snare 57s top and bottom. Those 57s with the API preamps just sound great. And that would be like my standard. And then I'll do a thing where I got this old Silvertone microphone. It's like this little square thing, what I think it came with was like back in the day, like an old reel-to-reel.
Yeah, tape machine.
Yeah, and so I take that and I'll throw that on the floor, right, like under the snare by the beater and facing up, and I'll run that out into like a twin reverb or something, and just put up a little big spring reverb, and so you just got this like Motown kind of spring verb on the kick and the snare and the drums, and I'll blend that in at times when it's needed, when you're kind of looking for like a, I don't know, like a vibe. Yeah, it's a vibe microphone, some length on this. On the snare.
That stuff's really cool. Again, another reference to Jason. He had this cool, I forgot what mic it was. It was something that was on the floor underneath the snare, and it was like going through the level lock.
Oh yeah,
and it just did such a cool thing. So I think it's a good reminder to get creative with that stuff. I've messed around with that stuff in the past. I've also made the mistake of trying to use every trick I could think of all at once, and then not being sure of what I was going to use later.
Yeah.
And so my takeaway from that is that doesn't work. It's like good to do the character thing, but do it with your ears on. Right. Make sure that you're getting a sound that actually works for that song. Yeah. I think. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I think it's all about intention. It's like if you got a pedal board in front of you and you're a guitar player and you just like throw it on chorus and flanger in the middle of like this like really intimate moment.
What's wrong with chorus?
Well, maybe it'd be perfect. Maybe it'd be like a nice a nice 80s chorus or something. But it's just like intention. I think everything that we do, and sometimes you don't know why. You're like, let's just do it because it might add some vibe. Yeah. And sometimes like the difference between like a drummer or a band hearing that spring reverb while they're recording, it just brings, they're like, wow, that's cool, and it excites them. And they just like, you're playing, you're like, oh, it's just such a vibe. And you're like, it's like an instant vibe versus like, well, maybe a snare was just being a typical snare.
But that's probably one of the best reasons to get an intentional cool sound out of your character mics right then and there. Make sure they work, is because the musician's going to hear it and respond to it. And if you don't have it going, if you think like, oh, maybe I'll do something cool with that later, it's like, maybe you won't. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because nobody actually played that based on that sound,
Yeah, and also like likewise is like if I hear a song, I'm like, oh, this could be really cool doing this, and then I'll throw up the microphone and do it, and then the artist is like playing, and sometimes like artists are a little bit cautious, they're like, oh no, I don't know if I like that, and I'm like, well, that's cool, so like I'll just pull it down, and then they're like, wait, actually I do like that. Sometimes you got to like introduce things to see if they like it, and if they don't, then you can always just still record it and mute it. And there's been times where I've used it later in the mix because they're like, you know what, you were right, that was really awesome. It's adding a vibe.
Well, there's a bunch of times where the talkback mic that I set up does some cool thing, and then I'm like, that sounds awesome. I need to route that to another track and record it.
Yeah. I mean, those are the things that make the space you're in, those little character things are what make things unique.
Right. Well, let's talk about some of the other instruments. So drums, you sort of mentioned kick treatment, snare, toms, overheads, ambient out front. And then do you do like distant room mics and stereo or any of that kind of stuff too?
It's been, well, if there's other musicians in the room, no.
Right, because it's going to hear the...
But if it's like just a drum session, then sometimes I'll throw a room mic up. But it's been interesting, like... I haven't, it's interesting, like when rooms work out and when they don't. Yeah. And sometimes, but I'll throw a mic up here and there. Sometimes I'll throw a mic in the piano and just close the lid and just
as a drum mic,
as a room mic. Yeah. You know what? And just the last thing on drums, what I find has been the most important thing, and it's been kind of a revelation for the last, I don't know, I think I've been doing it now for 6-7 years now at this point, but I wasn't doing it in my early, is tuning drums to the song. Right. We spend time. I try and make sure they're relatively in because it was amazing. Like we were doing this session and it was like the, what is the, Phil Ramone, boom, be my baby, right? It was that kind of groove for this song. And I'm like, I know it's the perfect groove, but it just didn't sound, it just felt uncomfortable. And so I just said, hold up. And it's just every time I was just like, it just felt uncomfortable. And I went in the room and I found out, the drums were like a half step off from the song, key of the song. And just tuning that into, it was all of a sudden, it was just like this level of like, it was almost creating like a little anxiety.
Do you feel like the time that you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has gotten you nowhere? Have you been looking for more of a simple and straightforward step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take years to learn? What if you could have a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all of your struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is just for you. Now you can discover the proven step-by-step mixing system from Grammy-winning mix engineer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix in your home studio that will sound great everywhere. Listen to this quote from one of our students, David. That was absolutely the most helpful and informative block of information and mentoring on the mixing process that I have ever been a part of. That was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up pro tips along the way, condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session. Look, I'm so confident that this will help you take your mixes to the next level, that if you can't get a killer mix in 30 days, I'll give you a refund, no questions asked. So if you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and start now by checking out the free preview of the ultimate snare mixing trick. And hopefully I'll see you in the front row of the Grammys. Now, was it the kick and the snare tuning, or was it the toms, or and if so, like how do you actually, if you wanted to change the pitch of the kick, how do you even do that?
Well, we've tuned them a bit. The kick is sometimes that's fine, but it was the snare was a half step off, and then the tom was like a quarter tone. It was a semitone, or it was just creating this weird resonance. And then when we went out,
it was like fighting the.
It was, and I went in. We used a drum bot and doom.
So what's the drum bot?
It's just it's a drum bot where you can actually click it on, and you just hit the drum, and it tells you like relatively what the pitch is of it.
Oh, no shit.
And then sometimes I'll use the piano too to comment, but like those drum bots work great. And
does it do tuning for you too, or does it just tell you what the pitch is?
Tells you the pitch, and then you got to tune to it.
Adjust.
So we did that. Drummer went back in, played it, and I was just like, it just like sat in the track. Everything felt good. And it was like, and I, it's interesting because like your first, younger me probably would have been like, let's grab an EQ.
Right.
Why does this drum feel weird? And it was like, whoa, that's the tuning, So I've been doing it now for actually now about 10 years or so. But like I've listened back, and I've also went back to some older records that I've heard the drums out of tune. I'm like, oh, that's why drums are out of tune.
Yeah,
you have to do it after,
And the idea of getting the drums in tune with the track is always fascinating, but the actual how-to is, sometimes you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't want to stop the session or whatever.
It can be a wormhole. You can't try and go crazy, but it's just if you can get within somewhere something. If you start going down, there's times where drums will just go off the wall if he's trying to get.
So is the drum bot an electronic thing, or is it a mechanical?
So it's just a digital click on. It's like a guitar tuner, but for drums.
No shit. All right, I'm going to go check that.
And it helps. It's saved like because trying to find drum parts, and it's amazing. So
Well, I mean, and plus I just love I just want to try everything in the studio. So if there's a cool tool that might do something cool, I want to try it.
That saved me on a few things.
Okay, so then now, how about bass? What are some things that tend to work well for bass?
Keep it simple on bass, just a DI
just direct
into the API, and then an amp,
So it's common for you to use an amp on a session?
Lately I spend just a lot of DI, and then I'll just, reamp after if we're moving quick, you know what I mean?
And if you used an amp at the same time, do you find that you got to pretty much have an ISO room for it? Or how would you even record a bass amp?
So what I've been doing, if the bass is in the room, I'll actually put a gobo between the drums and the bass and put the bass close to the drums.
Right. So the low frequency between the kick and the bass are sort of unified in that.
Yeah, and it's versus across the room shooting at each other.
Interesting.
I'll put them close to each other. And same thing with piano. I do that trick too, like get the piano as close as possible.
Oh, that's interesting.
Or if I'm looking for a room tone off the piano, which in my old studio, it was so resonant. The live room was really live, so you could actually get the piano humming, with drums. And sometimes we'd go in and we'd mic that and we'd lay like sheets on the strings and the ones that we wanted. We would like purposely
so you could get the right chord to ring out.
And that was kind of nerding out land. That's not a common thing.
It's fun to do though.
Yeah. But yeah, basically the bass, I'll get it close, and that's typically like a Fender. We got like a late 70s Fender that I'll just get some mid-range out of. And
there's one of the, actually another trick for that on the piano is, I forgot which pedal it is. Maybe it's the middle pedal or the left pedal.
Sustain.
Will sustain only the notes that are already played.
Oh.
So you can play a chord, put a weight on that sustain pedal, and it'll hold that chord on the piano.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll do the same trick you just described.
Yeah, actually, yeah. And actually one of my buddies I was recording with, I think he did that on one of our sessions. Yeah. I was like, cool, and then sometimes just the whole thing just kind of vibrating.
Yeah.
Just gives you this it's a string reverb or piano string reverb.
Yeah.
But
now if you wanted the piano isolated from the drums, and so do you just have the piano on a dolly or something where you can move it around the studio easy?
Yeah, it's just got wheels.
Just
casters.
Regular old piano casters.
Casters, yep.
And it's probably a very smooth floor, so it rolls.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we've got like the middle section's all hardwood, and then we have carpet, so sometimes we have to go up and over the...
Yeah, so that's similar to my situation. Now, do you find that when you're prepping for a session, the trick is... move the piano and get things arranged first and then have the tuner come in. Do you have a tuner come in for sessions? Is that common at all?
Yeah, we do. The piano holds pretty good. So we don't have to have them for every session. And some of the stuff we're doing, a lot of stuff I do, it's like just a little out is good.
Right.
Just, a little bit.
I had a band once that was in the studio, the Proto Men, and they were saying, they had the piano tuned before their session, and he said he preferred it before it was tuned because it sounded thicker.
Yeah.
Because just what you're saying, it's like it's just like a poly voice or detune feature on a synthesizer that makes it sound like a bigger sound by detuning the voices a little bit or a choir.
Yeah, and a lot of the records I like where we live in a world where everything is MIDI and everything's so in tune.
Right.
That like the classic records that we all love, everything was just it was all right around the tune, the center, the tuning. And there's something bigger when it's done right. It's all going to be done right and done to a thing. But it's interesting. Like when you take a modern track that everything is played, say, through MIDI instruments and perfectly in tune, it leaves less room for the singer to be a little bit more musical. Like you're either in tune or not.
Well, it's like when you perfectly beat detective the drums, then it seems like every other overdub that happens after that has to also sort of be perfectly
you got to you've kind of opened
set
up the
bar. Yeah. So while that topic is on, though, I think we briefly mentioned isotope and native instruments. Do you find yourself using for composing and sounds in the studio stuff like native instruments, Contact, or these like vast sound libraries of sounds?
Yeah, I mean, I love the native bundle, all that stuff. I use a lot of the, like as I was saying earlier, like we live in a world where it's like Americana music, and then you get sound design sounds.
Right.
And I love like what those keyboards do, like the 40s strings or 40s keys or whatever.
Yep.
And, and I love that it's really intuitive compared to like some other, plugins that I've used in the past. I like having the keyboard so I can zoom through the banks without having to mouse around.
Right. And
it keeps me more musical with it. Yeah.
With the complete keyboard, it lets me scroll through the sounds and you hear like a sample of what that sound is as you're flipping through and you're like, ooh, that's a cool one.
First it's like right hand clicking and getting,
you don't have to keep looking up at
it. It feels like a real, but yeah, they're
complete
great.
Control.
I mean, because before like the native instruments, I would always get frustrated with like trying to like mouse around and I wouldn't get deep on the settings, and I still don't really get that deep.
Right.
I kind of treat I kind of treat it like
you want to keep moving.
I keep moving. I kind of treat it like I was talking about with Easy Drummer. Like I'll go through, boom, boom, and here's a sound, cool, and then I'll tweak the parameters from there, and then just keep moving.
I'm always amazed at how, like, when I enter the synth overdub world like that, there's a part of me that thinks, oh, there's so many cool options. We'll have to go look for the right one. And then especially if I'm working with somebody else where like I'm producing and I'm trying to set them up with the sound to see like, hey, maybe you can find a cool line. I'm always amazed at how quickly, one of the first few ones we might try, like they play a part and it's pretty cool and like that works and that ends up in the song. And you're like, you had no idea. Sometimes it's hard to pre-plan with that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and the sounds are always changing and there's new ones coming along.
Right.
Which is good because it's easy to like just keep using the same sounds because you like them. But yeah, I'm with you on that. Like I kind of set a rule of like, all right, let's give ourselves a little bit of time here if we're like investigating a tone. And I just scroll, and everybody will just sit there and like, oh, that's cool. And then if it works, it works. And then once I play the part and I know it's in or whoever's playing the part plays it, I immediately commit the track.
Right. So you might let it be MIDI on a track first.
Yeah.
And then commit it afterwards.
But I'll commit it right away.
Do you find that's easier than just simply recording the sound in as audio the first time? Like routing it up that way? Or is it just faster to just have it be a MIDI track first and then commit it?
As computers act weird at times, sometimes you mean like go through it and then print it in real time?
Yeah, like have a source input track that's routing to another track and printing
in real time.
Yeah, or maybe maybe you've got Native Instruments as an instrument on an AUX track or something like that.
So I'll do it as a MIDI first. That way I can alter some things if I have to.
I think when music has important timing requirements, that really helps a lot because you can tighten something up.
Yeah.
Especially because MIDI sometimes doesn't play back in time. Sometimes the latency on the keyboard is like, you're not sure if it's doing quite what you meant for it to do.
I mean, I've got like some keyboard players that I bring in and some of them are like, they're all really great, but there's like some players that are like, they'll do things like I can't do on a keyboard.
Right.
But then they play down. I'm like, wow, it's amazing, but here it's too busy. So I'll like go in and just like simplify some stuff.
Right.
And then keep all the stuff that's like really cooking.
Yeah, that's true. As a producer, it gives you a tiny bit of control. Well, it gives you a massive amount of control.
It's really great
to like rearrange some of the part.
Yeah, because some of the burner players, like, they, especially if it's like a quick moving session, like, they come in and they're just going to blister out, give you 3 or 4 takes or whatever it takes. They'll get it down to a point, and then I'm like, that's cool, but I hear something kind of weird. Like, I'm really about like kind of, I don't over engineer, but like, there's certain beats that everyone should be on.
Yeah.
And it all depends on the track. But it's
or
nice to have
maybe they play a funny 7 and the thing, and you're like, yeah.
And it's rubbing against like the vocal or something.
Yeah. So Rockstars, just to reiterate, Ryan saying that, when the keyboardist comes in to do some quick overdubs, you can let those overdubs just be MIDI tracks with the instrument on there. And then when they leave or whatever afterwards, then you can go in and kind of readjust some of those note choices the way you're hearing it if something doesn't sit perfectly right.
Yeah.
Or tighten up the downbeat of stuff very easily. And then you just use the commit feature.
Yep.
And it's like commit that track to audio.
Yeah. And I do the same thing with plugins too. Like as I'm working along and starting to mix, once I know I hit a spot of like, this is sounding good, I'll go through and just commit it just like it would be any kind of piece of outboard gear.
Yeah.
That way my tracks always look clean and I'm like, I'm not fussing with things unless I'll do high to make an active so I can go back if you ever had to.
Right.
But like the idea of just continually moving forward and not getting, and not just,
don't leave choices for later that you could just get done now.
Yeah. Yeah. We've all done that. We all
and it's, but rewinding to the beginning when you talked about also don't just blast forward just because you're proud of how fast you can move.
Right.
When there are times where it would be better if you had given it a little more attention and care.
Right.
Finding that balance, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I said that in the beginning, but it's like, we do work really quick, but it's like it's quick and efficient, but also feels like it's a nice pace.
Yeah.
But, sometimes, someone's in town for 20 minutes and you're like, can you stop by the studio and blast off some, we just need you to burn some stuff that we're not capable of doing.
Right.
And so that's the beauty of the MIDI feature.
Yeah. Okay. How about guitars? Like, do you have some favorite ways to set up for an acoustic overdub or for miking up guitar amps?
Acoustic guitars, typical. I love using them. I've been using the Soyuz a lot for inexpensive microphone.
And the Soyuz is a small diaphragm again?
Yeah, the 013s are great.
Yeah.
It all depends on what it's going on. If it's just an acoustic track, if it's just like there's not going to be like big instruments and drums or whatever going on, I'll just sometimes use a larger diaphragm condenser microphone.
And do you find that do you find yourself in situations thinking like, well, if there's nothing else going on this, let's make the acoustic stereo. So it's like embracing the vocal in the middle a little bit more. Yeah,
I'll do like the space pair one, like to the right of the bridge, or when you're looking at it, to the left of the bridge, and then on like the 12th, 15th fret area in there. And, and every guitar is different. I'll just find that spot where it's not getting too honky and too much low end, and move on. Make sure they're in space off the guitar, so they're staying in phase with each other. And
so let's break that down a little more for the rock stars who are listening and not seeing the video. So one mic. So if you're a righty guitar player, then on your, I guess that's righty, even though it's my left hand that's fretting.
Oh yeah.
But the bridge would be to my right.
Yep.
And that's my strumming hand. And so then one mic is sort of looking towards the bridge a little bit, and it's getting the woody sound of the body of the guitar, right?
Yep.
And then where would you put the other mic?
And then the other one will be like around the 12th or 15th fret. And depending on what kind of guitar it is, if it's a bigger guitar, you're going to have a lot more low end. So you'll be closer to the 12th fret. Because once you start getting too close to the sound hole, you just start getting this it just takes all the clarity out of your guitar and just gets just kind of woofy.
Right.
And it just chokes out the tone. So I just find that. And I always say to like a guitar player, acoustic guitar, like, find that spot and stay there.
Trust your ears in the headphones.
Yeah.
Too,
And so if you have an experienced acoustic guitar player, I can sit down to a mic in 2 seconds and I find, all right, this is the sweet spot. And then I sit still and need a chiropractor after the session, because and it's amazing how much like having a player that can just listen and which brings up good headphones. If you got good headphone system, which is like so important, is the most important.
What do you guys do for headphones?
We got the Hearback right now, but I used to
the newer ones or the older ones?
The older ones.
Yeah.
I used to use I had the Behringer for a while too, and that was the Behringer ones. That's an affordable solution. But yeah, so depending on where it's going, if it's let's say it's a rock and roll track of some sort, and like you don't need all this fidelity. A 57 sounds amazing on a acoustic if it's in the right spot. Yeah. And then
we used to do at Alex the Great when I was working with Brad Jones, we would do the 57 and what we called the Crapsta mic, which was so it'd be the 57, and then right next to it, parallel to it, was a micro cassette recorder. In record and pause. And then you're using the built-in crunchy mic with its crazy compression.
Oh, nice.
And then you just like run that out through a DI, and God, that was such a cool sound.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you think of like a song like, say, like Canned Heat, like going down the country, like you listen to the guitars on those records, and they're kind of crunchy because whatever they were hitting for tape and whatever the recording medium, it's like you solo those up and they're crunchy, and that stuff sits in a track so better than like. We live in a world right now where things can be way too much full fidelity.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's like, which is good when it's good. And then sometimes you gotta,
bring it back to cool.
Yeah. And it's kind of a contradiction myself, but like, I don't spend too much time obsessing about it. I'll find, and the SM81 is an incredible acoustic guitar mic.
Yeah. I miss mine. Mine disappeared.
I think I heard that on one of your other episodes.
Stuff happens. You have studios, you do this long enough.
Yeah.
You have a vague recollection. You're like, I used to have one of those and I don't know what happened to it.
Maybe it's in your couch cushions or something.
It could be. Hopefully. Hopefully
or somebody else's couch cushion. But
I could just get another one and stop whining about it, For 15 years, I had a famous MCI console at my studio that originally came from Criteria Studio C in Miami, where it made some of the most iconic Grammy-winning records of the 1970s. And it sounded incredible. When I was ready to upgrade my studio to a full digital mixing setup, I teamed up with Rick Carson at Make Believe Studio, Metric Halo, and Golden Ear producer Bill Simzik to recreate the legendary legendary MCI console as the new MBSI plugin. The MBSI captures the same iconic sound used on multi-million selling records like Hotel California for the Eagles, Saturday Night Fever and Staying Alive for the Bee Gees, I Shot the Sheriff for Eric Clapton, We're an American Band for Grand Funk Railroad, and the soundtrack to Grease, the movie, all for legendary producers like Tom Dowd, Todd Rundgren, and Bill Szymczyk. The MBSI plugin not only delivers the authentic sound of the original MCI console faithfully, but it also adds new features like a top-notch compressor, overdrive, and a dual EQ filter switch, adding tools that Bill Szymczyk said he would have loved to have in the original console. Now you too can get that Grammy-winning MCI sound in your home studio. Whether you're recording or mixing, you can experience the sound of Miami 1976 with the MBSI plugin and soak up a little sunshine in your sound at makebelievestudio.com/MBSI.
Yeah, but the SM81 like some of the best. Like I used an SM81 into Apollo on a record at one point in a cabin, and that's some of the best guitar sounds I've ever acoustic. And obviously it was a guitar, the room. It all
cabin might have helped.
The cabin,
the good vibes,
the humidity in the room, all of that stuff matters. But I try and move as quick as possible, and just not I'm trying not to over engineer, over analyze,
right.
But just it's really like intuitive. It's like cooking. You're like needs a little bit of this, a little bit of that,
right?
And you just throw it in the
And how do you know that? Hopefully by trusting your ears, right?
Yeah.
So like if you're cooking, how do you know it needs a little bit of this and a little bit of that?
Well, you taste it,
right? Or you smell it even.
Or you smell it, or you can tell by how it looks.
Yeah.
Depending on what you're trying to add.
And so like that applies to making records too.
Yeah.
It's like you got to taste the sounds.
Yep.
To see if they taste right.
And now the main thing to all this, here's the thing, is if you're not listening to, if you're in a room and that is lying to you with your monitors, you don't know how much salt to put in the soup, or you don't.
Right.
And so that's another thing too. So say like most people don't have rooms that are telling them the truth. So don't over-engineer. That's a time when you would not want to over-engineer. You want to play it safe. Don't make too big a commitments on, have your safety microphones. But that being said, if you can get your room sounding the best you can so that you can trust what you're doing, then you can start making bolder decisions and you can move quick. And that's the only way you can move quick is because I know what I'm hearing.
It'd be like trying to add aromatic herbs to your soup and chili in the kitchen, but somebody's burning a tire over by the sink.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah.
I can't quite tell.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, and that's the main thing is Now,
how about electric guitar? I mean, we got to roll out here.
Yeah.
But electric guitar and vocal.
57 or a Royer. On the sometimes
so one or the other usually, or do you do the dual thing?
Sometimes I'll do the dual thing.
And what does the dual thing give you? What's the benefit of doing the dual thing on an electric guitar?
Well, you just kind of get brighter or darker, really.
Just by more of one.
Yeah, a little bit more mid range. In the 57 and the Royers is kind of.
Now, would you because you have a console, would you just pull them up on two faders, do a fader balance, and then just that's what you're printing? Or do you let them be on separate tracks?
I've been doing separate tracks just because when you are moving along at a productive pace, sometimes you want to have that option later. That's the one thing that I'll do that, and then I'll sometimes do a room microphone with the guitars too as well.
Now, do you find that the option later do you just decide at mix what the blend is and that's what you do, or do you find that it's important to pick a sound you like and then just sort of lock it in somehow, even inside Pro Tools?
Yeah, sometimes so if it's a song that has multiple guitar overdubs, electric guitar, sometimes I'll get to mix and just dump one.
Right,
dump one. Just keep the ribbon or keep this, or sometimes I'll do a blend.
Yeah,
and then when it's if it's a real, and then I'll do, and I'll also do room mics on guitars, electric guitars, depending on how it needs to sit in the track. If it's something I need up forward, close, then the close mics work.
Now, when you say room mics, what kind of room? So example, I have an ISO room where my amps end up a lot in my studio.
Yep.
But I'm not always so sure that the room's worth
depends on how much.
I don't know. Maybe I should try more.
I think it depends on how much the low end's building up in that small room. But like at the studio in particular, like I can put an amp in there, just on one end of the room, and then go out about 4 or 5 feet and have like a large diaphragm condenser or something like that. Like, and I'll typically do those when I want there to be more depth. Like I want to do, like, say, like you want to do this like fuzzy guitar tone, but it's also behind the vocals.
Yeah.
So I'll do that, and then that room mic will sit better behind the vocals because of the way it's recorded and the proximity.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard room mics on guitars sound amazing.
Yeah.
And I've also like tried to use them on sessions I've done where I'm like, I don't know, this just isn't doing a thing for me. So it's always fascinating to me to think about it and talk about it and find the right thing. I think it does help when you get to know a studio and you begin to understand like this sound is one that I like, so you can repeat it,
Yeah, I did a track with this band that I can't wait for it to be out. An artist out of Maine called Coyote Island. And we did this really cool guitar solo like section where we layered the guitars, and we just used room mics on it. I just used a room mic about 4 or 5 feet off, and it was perfect because it sits in the track. But it's true. It's like room mics on drums. Sometimes you put them up, they work, and sometimes they don't. So, on those ones, I'll do a close and one off, and then you've got an option. And
any thoughts about how you like to record your vocals?
Vocals, I'm kind of, it's based on the singer. And
what about for yourself?
Me, I like a SM7. I like the 441. Sennheiser 441 is great. I know that my voice translates well on a 47. But
wait, the 421 Sennheiser, or is the 441 like the older?
450. It's the one that's the silver one.
Yeah. Right. The old school. I think that is the 440 or something like that.
441, and that's the one that Stevie Nicks used. Right. And you see videos with Petty and.
But not like the AKG 441 or
no, that's those. Actually, I have got one of those that sound pretty good.
Yeah.
And then ribbon microphones. I've used the Coles,
and that's just the style that you dig for your voice on your records and stuff. What about for other artists? How do you determine what kind of vocal mic might be the right choice for them? Or how do you help them determine if that's the case?
It really just comes down to how they sound. If you got somebody that's got a little bit of a spiky tone in the top end, I might use a dynamic or I may run into the API and then hit a tube compressor to kind of help knock down some of that.
And when do you discover that they got a spiky top end? Once you're already rolling the session, or like, do you have a little listen to them before you even mic up for a session?
Typically, if I hear the demo, I'll kind of have an idea. Like, I think this is going to be a 441 day.
Yeah.
And it's funny, even a lot of female singers, I'm putting them on like SM7s and 441s.
Yeah. Well, if you tell them Stevie Nicks sang on it, they'll probably be like,
"That's right,
cool."
Well, if you think about it, and even in the day, like we're kind of in a world of darker right now. It seems like the last, everything from Billie Eilish,
Billie Eilish,
and now this close. Everyone's like in this close. It's like this close vocal and tone, and then these really ambient, lush native instruments vibes things going on, which is it's cool. So it really, for me, it's like I don't have anyone, and sometimes it's
and so if it is that kind of thing, then you find the dynamic brings it up close, or when would you think, oh, we want to use a big condenser on this?
Big condensers typically when it's like, you're just kind of looking for that big clear vocal in the front of in the pop, or it's just more up in the focus. And you got somebody that's got a really clear tone and they're warm, and and they've got, maybe the people with the prettier voices get the bigger microphones, and the people that got a little bit more gnarly to them, I'll use the dynamics because that's going to fuzz it out and make it sit in the track.
In the same way that a guitar amp, that you might not be able to stick your human ear right up to, you can stick up a 57 and it can sound cool.
Right.
Coming out the speakers under control. It sort of controls stuff. Right.
And that being said, and also like quieter guitar parts, like you could put a nice condenser on if it's a nice clean electric guitar part.
Right.
And like just basically what you just said.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, let me jump to this question. It's one I like to ask all our guests on the show. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine, and you get to go back in time and you find young Ryan, who's, before you've managed multiple studios, maybe before you've even been touring and doing all that stuff. And you say, listen, dude, or maybe it's at the point where you were thinking about the studio, musicians say, listen, dude, I've come back in time to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice would you go back and give yourself if you could?
I think I would, I think I'd go back and say, trust myself, your instincts on what you're doing, and spend all your money on getting a room that sounds good. Like a room.
A great space.
A great space, you know, and I would say, because it's easy to get real excited about expensive microphones and this and that. But, you know, I also, when I started, it was a bit different, like in terms of like the knowledge, that the options we have now. But I think it would be like, invest in a good space, because then the sky's the limit. If you know what you're hearing, and nowadays there's options for people to do that. So invest in a good space, or some way that you can just make decisions and you can taste the soup that you're making.
Right. Yeah. Good point. Yeah, I think that's so true. I mean, because when you have a great instrument or a great space, almost any microphone with a good mic preamp is going to be able to capture something that gets you excited about it. Yeah. So, and it's very hard to make a sound like it's in a great space if it's not. Yeah. You know, if it's in the wrong room, you can't. You know, it's like my ISO booth. If like probably no amount of room mic is going to make it sound like it's out in the live room, or, you know, and it's one of the reasons why I think we have a big advantage by doing the home studio thing, is because we're more likely to learn what recordings sound like with a mic and a laptop in these unusual locations, like the stairwell, you know, like an old house with wooden stairs, or like a basement space. You know, you hear all these spaces. There's a lot of opportunity for artists to create out there, and I think that's the main thing. And also, likewise, if you don't have a room you understand, then just know that you should reach out to somebody that can help you, you know, because sometimes there's a space that just physically won't sound right. Yeah. So maybe explore some of the new headphone setups that are working. But I think just knowing, the most important thing is knowing what you're hearing. And if you don't know what you're hearing, then, you know, capture it the best you can, and then go find somebody that can help you. Actually, I just got a new pair of these Atom Audio H200s in here, which sound awesome. They're super comfy, and they've got they have the software that lets you essentially like do some correction, some EQ correction, but it also does crosstalk, so it emulates speakers more. Yeah, like put you in a room. Yeah, it's not like a room simulator. It's more like it mimics the effect of hearing speakers out in front of you instead of so wide and stuff. So, but just a great point. I mean, like, you can learn a ton in headphones, and then, you know, if you can find somebody who can come in and help you treat a space, it makes a huge difference. I mean, like, even if you do it remotely over the internet and buy panels and treat your room to dial it in better, or like, you know, me working with Carl Tatz and coming in, he did my room, and I was just like, this is just a holy shit factor, where it's like, I don't know. It would take me a while to get to that conclusion. You know, it's nice to have somebody come in and dial it in, then you just play music and you're like, that sounds amazing. Yeah. I mean, your room sounds fantastic. And I was surprised how well, you know, like what I heard on the PMCs translated down here. Yeah. So I guess we both got something good dialed in. Well, dude, thanks for joining me on the podcast, Rockstars. Thank you so much for watching. Where can the Rockstars go find you online? If they're ready, if they're maybe on the East Coast, or they're traveling up that way, or they're on tour and they just want to come make a great sounding record with you. You can find me at ryanordway.com and at thestudioportland.com as well. But, you know, if you want to reach directly out to me, got any questions, hit me up. Awesome. And then we've included a playlist in the show notes of Ryan's music, so you can just click right through and go listen to it. And if you got any questions for us or anything, take advantage of the YouTube comments and drop a comment in, and we'll try and hit you back. Thanks, dude. Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lij Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our awesome sponsors who help make this episode possible. iZotope, Native Instruments, Roswell Pro Audio, and Atom Audio. And remember to take advantage of our special coupon codes. At iZotope.com and nativeinstruments.com, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, please check out our sponsors using the links in our show notes. These are all things that I highly recommend for your studio because they're going to help you make your best record ever. Also, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is new for us here, and it's a great way for you to help support this show, so I greatly appreciate it. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko and Liz Hulitskaya. Thanks so much for watching and for listening. My name is Lij Shaw, and I'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.